The Scarlet King from the SCP Foundation versus Zalgo from Creepypasta. When it comes to the idea of evil, it can come in many ideas or forms, but all of them had to come from somewhere, and this is where we get to what is considered to be the ultimate idea of this. The King of Darkness versus the Hive Mind of Chaos. This matchup is ridiculously complex, and due to the fact that the Scarlet King has been getting a bit more attention in the versus scene currently, I think it's finally time to discuss the opposing evil horror, and who is ultimately the true force of the end. Let's take a look. Let's start out with the Scarlet King, and oh my, this character gets complicated. So I will try to give you a short idea of who he is, but even that's going to be a decent bit, so strap in. So the Scarlet King is basically an ancient being, but one that kind of changes depending on who you ask. But the basic idea of him is that he is a fundamental concept of violence and depravity, and pretty much just evil in general. He's been many things, from the boogeyman to actual Satan, or not even being a traditional being but more of a pattern. But regardless on what you think he is a cosmic threat to everything. And he is actually a threat that the SCP Foundations themselves actually caused, theoretically, because they wanted to discover every mystery, but they ended up bringing him into existence and giving him definition. And while it has been debated on what the true incarnate of the Scarlet King actually is, the thing is, it kind of is everything that we believe it is. The Scarlet King will simply just make whatever we believe into part of itself. But enough with the lore, let's just get into the scaling of this character. First of all, let's just go into lower things that other characters that are connected to him are able to do. First of all, there's a being known as SCP-2317K, otherwise known as the Devourer of Worlds. This creature is a being who wants to escape, and after its final chain breaks, it would cause a world-ending scenario. This creature wasn't originally supposed to be a part of the Scarlet King, but due to the Mr. Exxon campaign, he ended up becoming a part of it. And this creature is massive, with its normal size being around 200 kilometers, a size that would easily crush cities just by slightly moving around. And also again, he is theorized to end the entire world once he escapes. But this isn't even the most ridiculous size thing when it comes to the Scarlet King, because his connections can reach to the size of the entire sea, and up to 10 trillion times the size of a normal person. If you want a little bit of an idea of how big this means that he would be around 17 billion kilometers in length. The farthest distance between Earth and Pluto is only around 7.5 billion kilometers, meaning that this size would be around 2.26 times this distance. And honestly, he could be larger depending on what it fully meant by his original size. But this is literally nothing in comparison to what we are going to get to in here, so let's get through a few more specifics. First of all, the Scarlet King is abstract, and thus a lot of his forms also are as well, and can warp reality, meaning that they don't really need to abide by any full size. So you can argue he can just grow to infinite sizes. But growing in size is only like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what he can do. As we said, he can warp reality, erase beings from existence, warp time, open portals between dimensions, summon entire armies, and there is just so much more than this. Honestly, it's a smaller list saying what he couldn't do. But anyways, the Scarlet King can actually kill other gods like himself, which are other fundamental concepts of reality, and absorb them into himself. The Scarlet King is obviously very powerful, but how truly powerful he can get, well, as his entire character is, it is very complicated. First of all, he's a being that exists in a higher layer of reality, and with him being pretty much destined to destroy everything but the narrative of the anti-story herself, Anafabula, who the Scarlet King himself is a part of, and actually the reason why he is so associated with the number 7, with his 7 brides, 7 spears, and 7 gates for the Scarlet King, but in truth is, how powerful is the Scarlet King being able to destroy everything? Well, to figure this out, first, one of Scarlet King's main goals is that he would destroy the Tree of Knowledge, which is also known as Yggdrasil. To describe what this tree actually is, it basically contains infinite different realities of the SCP universe, which contains infinite amount of universes with infinite timelines, with things like the New Spear, which is actually at the lower level of this, pretty much taking everything we know about human thought and cognitions and transcends any idea of what we can properly comprehend. It's a absolutely confusing anomaly, but it's effectively a dimension that is outside of the narrative layers of existence with an infinite number of narrative layers, which are at the lower end of what is contained in this tree. And the Scarlet King is potentially able to destroy this, meaning high outer versal power for him at the very minimum. And he can go on par with the Pikmin proposal, a very similar thing, but it basically divides reality and fictional ideas. So yeah, he is a very broken character, and despite all of this is not even near the worst part about him. If he wasn't broken enough, he isn't simply able to be destroyed by defeating him or overpowering him. You need to make sure he doesn't exist at all. Basically, he has a true form, which as long as that remains, he will always be alive, and since he's rewritten himself across all of reality since the beginning of time, he basically can't be destroyed unless you destroy him throughout his entire existence or rewrite him as a fundamental concept. But despite all of this and the broken nature of this character, it does have its weaknesses. The Scarlet King is really only as powerful as it is because of the belief of people having in it, especially fear, and without it, his influence is actually a little bit more halted. And based on the fact that he wants to destroy existence so he can appease himself and release his pain, that actually more seems to imply he can't really exist properly much without it. Although simply believing that you can beat him isn't like a completely end-all be-all because it takes a lot of it, but still it is a weakness he has. But overall, yeah, the Scarlet King as a whole is a incomprehensible and inevitable end. The absolute idea of our inevitable fate. And he seems almost unstoppable. But despite Anafabula making him associated with the number 7, can he handle the being who sings the 7th song? Now moving on to Zalgo. Zalgo is another very complex character, and there's a lot to talk about when it comes to him and a lot of different stories he comes from, and for the sake of things, we're going to do a similar thing as we did with the Scarlet King, and talk about different story aspects and do a composite on him, so we can get a more full idea of how threatening he actually is. But as a whole, Zalgo is more of an idea than a full entity, and he comes in many forms. It is theorized that Zalgo is the embodiment of chaos and has existed before creation itself, although there are many different theories to his origin, and he's had many titles over his years of existence. And obviously he has taken many forms. Some that are decently comprehensible, but also still abstract, but others are absolutely horrific or just unfathomable. And he can basically change into whatever your greatest fear is. And similar to his opponent, he can pretty much do whatever he wants to. And again, the list is way shorter of what he can't. But to simplify, Zalgo is able to steal souls, mentally manipulate and control others, which is not just limited to humans, but other creatures that fall under this as well. He's able to warp reality in almost any degree he pleases, grow beyond sizes that can dwarf stars, and summon massive armies of the undead, and travel through dimensions, and he's even able to remove concepts outright. And he obviously has a lot more as well. But most importantly are his 7 mouths. 6 of these mouths are always screaming and affecting reality, but if the last one were to ever sing, everything will end and be sent into nothingness. But how truly impressive is Zalgo? Well, there is quite a bit to go over. First of all, obviously he's in the star level ranges since he can become bigger than one and hold a dying star in the palm of his hand. And Zalgo can also exist in completely different dimensional spaces than ours, since his dimension is just at a higher layer of reality than our own. So obviously he's easily a higher dimensional tier, but first we need to look at how some of the stories describe him. First of all, we're going to start with some of the older ideas of Zalgo from Smorky, which is kind of the main Zalgo guy, and even then Zalgo was a ridiculous threat, being able to infect multiple medias with their own cosmologies theoretically, with him being able to manipulate pretty much everything within them and even manifest ideas throughout time. But as a whole, these comic strips have hundreds to millions of possible worlds that can come from this, based on what we know from the generators. And again, Zalgo exists outside of all of this, and since this is not only just one comic, and Zalgo can pretty much casually manifest and manipulate all of them to the narrative level, this means that even back then, Zalgo was pretty casually into the multiversal level ranges, since he just exists outside of all of that. But believe it or not, this isn't even close to the highest we can scale this character. Because that's when we need to get into some of the other stories, because it is stated that he exists beyond the veil, which could mean quite a few different things, but this partially implies the idea that he exists beyond our dimensional understanding. But there's a little bit more proof into this if you don't want to take this statement like this. There has been several other statements where he's be able to go beyond and corrupt or Zalgify entire sections of the wiki, which kind of border on the idea of fiction and reality. But to figure out how powerful Zalgo truly is, we need to look at the Library of Eternity, with this being the highest place of eternity, and only said to be able to be destroyed by a nigh omnipotent force. And of course, Zalgo destroys it. So how big exactly is this library? Well, this library is infinitely in length with infinite size shelves that transcend the infinite stories, which transcend their infinite pages, which transcend each other from every page moving forward. Wow, this sounds familiar. So yet again, we have infinite infinities that transcend infinite infinities more. So again, at minimum, using this story, he is easily in the high outer ranges. And also, Zalgo is basically impossible to kill, since he transcends us, and there are multiple factors that make him unstoppable. You need to not only destroy the dimension he's from, but in order to beat his dimension, you need to somehow destroy the concept of fear itself. And without it, Zalgo cannot be destroyed, and even then, this only implies defeated, so we're not even 100% sure that this would actually fully take him out. And in terms of weaknesses, he doesn't have very many, and a lot of them are very complex, but as we went over, if you basically destroy the concept of fear, it is possible to beat him, as long as you destroy his dimension along with it. So as a whole, Zalgo is just beyond everything. He's an inevitability in the sheer idea of evil, and as long as it exists, he's not going anywhere. But, again, is he the most powerful evil, or will he be seeing Scarlet? Let's finally get to the debate. Now we can finally compare these two embodiments of chaos and evil, and who wins, and oh my god, we have a lot to go over. This matchup is ridiculously complicated, which you probably should have been able to tell based on how much I've said it already. But let's get a few things out of the way. First of all, none of their lower physical forms or armies are really going to do much here. While they are higher dimensional themselves, this is really just between the other two that we're focusing on, and their armies are pretty much irrelevant here, even if they are powerful. And simply just holding stars and being bigger than the distance between Earth and Pluto, while impressive, literally mean nothing here. And a lot of other things are kind of irrelevant because these characters almost do the exact same things. They can warp reality, warp narratives, their presence physically is basically a concept more than an actual thing, and are empowered from those set ideas. Both can kill other concepts, both live at higher dimensional existences beyond our traditional understanding of layers. Honestly, they are almost the exact same character. But let's just get this out of the way real quick, because just using kind of what is commonly accepted as the original version of Zalgo with Smorky's version, yeah, this isn't even a close comparison. Zalgo may be beyond multiversal level stuff in his series, but that's not even notable compared to the Scarlet King, who's just transcending the idea of dimensions altogether, which are transcending other ideas of infinite dimensions. Meaning, despite the fact that they are very similar, just using this version of Zalgo, the Scarlet King pretty much takes every category other than experience, since they both have existed since the beginning of time. Although arguably Zalgo might be a bit more since his experience is more natural, but either way, it doesn't matter. The Scarlet King is absolutely crushing this version of Zalgo. But again, allowing the Scarlet King to have all of his stories, that also opens the door for Zalgo. And we can use more compositing for Zalgo as a whole in order to fully decide this. And obviously this is very difficult to talk about because, as we stated, these characters are almost exactly the same. And unlike in my normal videos where I would usually go category by category and the ones that I believe matter and who takes what, honestly, it's kind of a draw in every stat. As we mentioned before, they have pretty much the exact same abilities. Speed is pretty much irrelevant since both of these guys transcend the idea of the speed formula entirely. Their speed would literally be irrelevant. And believe it or not, this would also include power. They both transcend things that already transcend infinite layers, which are transcending infinite layers themselves. The Tree of Knowledge and the Library of Eternity are very similar ideas and function under very similar principles. And there's no real way to say which one is truly more impressive, because you can argue both of them being high outer to even boundless levels of reality. And both can scale to aspects like the Pikmin proposal in the wikis, which basically are the tie-ins between reality and fiction. Again, these are just so similar in almost every regard that it is almost impossible to actually find a true winner. So theoretically, this battle would never end. But if we really want to draw our straws here and just actually say who is more likely to win, if there ever is a winner, there are things we can look at. And ultimately, I believe the most important category that can decide any sort of winner in this fight is who can exploit the other's weaknesses. This just makes the already complicated nature of this matchup even more complicated. The Scarlet King will always remain as long as he exists throughout somewhere in time, while Zalgo is a little bit more of a direct way of killing him, just being able to kill him outright, but due to the complicated nature of how to actually permanently put him down, or, well, kind of permanently put him down. Again, it's debatable if this is even a permanent solution. But anyways, as a whole, these two are basically two impossibilities trying to take each other down. Both can destroy concepts, but trying to destroy each other's concepts when they embody those exact same concepts is just, well, a little bit difficult. Because if they destroy each other's concepts when they are that concept, how does that really work? It's a ridiculous idea and it's just super complex. So they can't instantly take each other out because they would have to overpower each other to do that, but they also simply can't just kill each other in general. So how exactly does this fight ever end? And, well, if you're going to make an argument for who wins, well, there is one way that a character here could win, and believe it or not, even though this might sound ridiculous, Zalgo is actually the only one who has a pretty definitive way of winning this, especially when giving him everything he actually has. Because as unstoppable the Scarlet King is, he is very much susceptible to being rewritten. This is a constant defining nature of his character. This is how he's defeated, and this is how he's going to be destroyed. He has no resistances to being rewritten, believe it or not, which is something Zalgo can do, and most likely would do, with him being able to just rewrite stories to their entirety. And while the Scarlet King could theoretically do something similar back, Zalgo has shown outright resistances to this type of thing, with him basically controlling the script entirely. Any story of his, he's always in control of his plot, meaning rewriting him is just a little less likely than the other way around. So as ridiculous as this might sound, Zalgo actually just is the more threatening force, and is just the more capable of the two. At least, again, this is a composite, and I will clarify this again. This is taking them at their absolute best, and since we're giving the Scarlet King all of his stories, we have to do it the other way around. But the idea of Zalgo being superior is actually not inconsistent with how it's actually portrayed, because even the SCP Foundations themselves say that Zalgo cannot be classified as an SCP because he is too overpowered. And there are many statements saying this actually. And they are more recent than a lot of Scarlet King's scaling, meaning that it's not entirely against the idea that Zalgo would be the superior one. Now, I'm not saying that this is the entire crux of the debate, but it does give a point that Zalgo does have some superiority, and it is a supported idea, along with everything else we have found here today. So, as I said, in a very shocking turn of events, I personally believe Zalgo is the superior one of these beings of absolute fear incarnate, in a battle that could last for a long time, but only one inevitably can come out in the end, and that is the king of creepypasta himself. Zalgo wins. But yeah, ultimately that's just my take. I know for a fact people are going to comment down below this video with their opinions, and honestly, I know for a fact this is going to be the unpopular opinion. But in the end, that's just my opinion. So, do you guys agree with me, or is there something I missed? And even with this verdict in mind, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and my take on this matchup. I do personally believe that this is my favorite for both, and it is a ridiculously complex matchup as a whole, and I think it was definitely one that was worth looking into. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.